you are. It's not going to take long for you to take over the leadership of your countries. But now, that doesn't mean you're going to be president. If you try to be president, you're going to get killed. So when I say take over the leadership, what I mean is you can actually run things if nobody knows you're running it. If you want to get credit for it, you're going to catch hell. See? And Ralph Bunche set me down with Martin Luther King, and Ralph Bunche said he tried to turn down the Nobel Peace Prize. He said, look, if white folk knew what I was doing here, I wouldn't be alive 15 minutes. So, and he stayed there. He was one of the founders of the United Nations. In fact, he was in Africa, in South Africa, in 1937 and 39, doing intelligence analysis on the Boers because they were supporting Hitler. And that's a book I wish you'd find and read. It's called Ralph Bunche, An American Life, by Brian Urquhart, U-R-Q-H-A-R-D-T, I think. Because you know Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther King was building on the foundation of Ralph Bunche. Ralph Bunche started in the 30s and set up the United Nations. Almost everything in the United Nations was written by Ralph Bunche. But nobody knew it. And when he and Dr. King met, and I met with him, he said, my only regret is that you're exposed on too many fronts. He said, you could not escape leadership in Montgomery. I'm sorry, you're right about Vietnam. But I'm sorry you got dragged into that because it's dangerous. And 1 year to the date from Ralph Bunche's conversation with Dr. King, he was killed. So now, they tried to kill Ralph Bunche twice and just barely missed. But if he had been trying to be seen and trying to be important, he'd have been dead. So the first rule of African leadership is there's no limit to what you can do if you let somebody else get the credit. See? And eventually people, like I'm 82 now, and so for the last 10, 12 years, people have been giving me credit. But I've been doing stuff since I was 19, you know, that nobody knew about it. And if they'd known about it, I probably wouldn't be still alive. So I have a friend of mine from Malawi, and we went to Georgia State and got an MBA, and no, he couldn't get an MBA. He graduated from Georgia State with a 3.8 average, and they wouldn't let him in the business school. And he came to see me, and I said, what do you want to go into business school there for? They don't know anything about African business. And I said, and at that time, business school cost $42,000 for tuition. I said, don't waste your money. Take the little money you got, and what business do you think you could make it in Malawi? He said, well, I was in the trucking business. I had one truck. So we said, let's buy another truck. So we helped him buy another truck. And he went back to Malawi. Now he's got 37 trucks. He's hauling everything everywhere for everybody. And he's still just maybe 42, 43. And he came to me last year and he said, they want me to run for president. I said, hell no. He said, why? They say, I said, look, you will be dead soon. See, make all the money you can make wait till you're 55 or 60, and all of these other crooks will have gotten out of the way. And everyone will know you're an honest servant of the people, and they will make you president one day, but don't you try to be president, because you'll get killed. Now, isn't that reasonable?
Yeah.
I mean, don't you know people who thought they could be president who are now dead? So the first thing is stay alive. And the way you stay alive is by giving other people the credit. I don't know who is responsible for sending you here, but somebody knows you and thinks you're important. But they told a young lady graduated from here with straight A's, fluent in French and English. She went to Coca-Cola, and the man just plain out and told her, said, I'm sorry, but if you came here, you take my job. So you really need to go somewhere else. So Africa is no worse than any place else. That it is the survival of the fittest, but it's the survival of the smartest. And so do whatever you can do. Now, you from Zimbabwe?
Yes, sir.
Now, which side are you on?
Apolitical. Apolitical.
What's your job in Zimbabwe?
I'm into financial services. I run a microfinance company.
You run a microfinance company. You ever hear Kingdom Securities?
Yes, Niger Chanakira.
Yeah, he's still operating?
Well, he's out of business now.
Huh?
He's now running a mentorship academy. He's now out of
Because we loaned him his first $1 million to start that Kingdom Securities. And you know Strive Masiwa?
Yeah.
Strive is a saint. Say, but he better not run for nothing. But Strive doesn't have to worry about being president in Zimbabwe. Strive is leading all of Africa, and Strive, white folk all over America love and respect him. In fact, in Fortune magazine last month, he was listed as one of the 50 most influential people in the world.
Yeah.
And he's sending students from Zimbabwe here to study, 10 more every year. But I'm a really good friend of Mugabe, and I like him. I think he's smart, and I think he's unforgiving of white people, and that's his sin. But he has plenty of reason not to like them. See, but don't ever underestimate his intelligence. He's one of the smartest men I've ever met, anywhere. But he doesn't, it's like Obasanjo. Obasanjo doesn't get along with many white people because he talks to them like they're little boys. You know, I mean, he says, wait a minute, son. You're the president of some little department here in the United States. I'm the leader of 170 people on the African continent. And you dare lecture me about corruption? And he got up and he walked out. And he just does not allow people to disrespect him. Now, I'm a little more diplomatic. And I think that the definition I have of diplomacy is that you have to tell people to go to hell in such a way, a nice way, that they look forward to the trip. And Martin Luther King used to say that the way you do that is the sandwich method. He said you start off by telling them all the good things you can say about them. You congratulate them on their children, on their businesses, on their scholarship, on their speaking, on everything else, and when you get their ego really built up, say, but there's one little thing you maybe need to check on and be careful about. And that's when you sandwich in the criticism. See? But after you put, it's like a sandwich, after you put put the mayonnaise and the mustard and got it all good and tasting, you can slip a little tough meat in there. And then you put the top on and you tell him something good and your great hopes for his leadership at the end, see. But you have to find a way to deal with people without being confrontational. I think that's the key to Martin Luther King's work in the South. And we knew we were right. And he used to say that to make it in this world, you have to give up the love of money. It doesn't mean you can't have money, but you can't love money and want to be rich. And the other thing is you have to give up the fear of death. That either the love of money or the fear of death, in effect, makes you a slave. You become a slave to your fears, or you become a slave to money. And when I say money, I don't mean cash or houses. It could, I mean, we sell out for such little things. You know, I mean, just little trinkets make the difference. That he came to redeem the world. And the way you redeem the world and what you're going to be asked when you go to church and what your preacher's going to be asked. He's not going to ask you, you know, how many times you went in church. He's not going to worry about whether you gave money. The only questions you're asked is, did you feed the hungry? Did you clothe the naked? Did you heal the sick? Did you help set at liberty those who are oppressed? Now, he's not going to even ask you about your sins or what you consider sins. Because I don't think what you consider sins or what the church considers sins is something God worries very much about. What God worries most about is forgiveness. All men sin and fall short of the glory of God, and women do too. So if you're going to try to get to heaven on your merit, we all hellbound. It's only because God forgives us that we are able to do anything. But the one requirement for God forgiving us is that we forgive others. If we can't forgive, I mean, Mandela is probably the best example of that. That when he came out of jail, he said, when Bill Clinton asked him, said, didn't you really ever get angry or bitter? He said, yes, I did. He said, but I knew what I was in jail for. And it wasn't until I started to get out of jail that I began to get angry. And he said, I realized I wasn't really angry. I was afraid of what was out there. And he said, if I was going to take on the challenges of a new South Africa, I had to leave all of the burdens and baggage of hatred and violence and evil behind me. And I went to a Thanksgiving ceremony up in, where's Popo Malefi in the Northern Province? And they had the judge, it was the anniversary of this Delmas treason trial. And they had the prosecutor that prosecuted him, the judge that committed the life in prison. Well, first he committed him to death for treason. And then they had Bishop Tutu and they had the defense lawyers. And they had everybody there together. And they asked me to come and speak after everybody got through. And I couldn't understand what was going on. Because these were 20 young men who were trying to overthrow the government. And they got caught and they were sentenced to death. Well, they thanked Bishop Tutu for believing in them. And he got them lawyers who then got their death sentences commuted to life in prison. And so everybody could thank Bishop Tutu. Well, I could understand that. Then the defense attorney who defended them, they thanked him, and everybody cheered. About 10,000 people out on a football field in the hot sun. They were cheering and, you know, everybody having a good time. Next thing, they brought the prosecutor up, and they thanked him for convicting them. And then they brought the judge up and said, look, you were doing your job in the old South Africa, and we were doing our job. If we had not done our job, you wouldn't have been able to do your job. It was your job to send us to jail. He said, and because you did your job, we had 10 years in Nelson Mandela University for free. And he said, I wouldn't be the governor of this province. Well, that's where all of the platinum mines and everything are up in that part of, and he was running one of the wealthiest sections of South Africa. And he said, if I had not spent 10 years in jail with Madiba, I wouldn't be able to do this. I couldn't have afforded to go to college. I couldn't have afforded to be around such learned men, except you put us all in jail together. And they thank you. They thank them. And then they sang Kosa Sikalele, and everybody got happy. You know, but I'm saying that's the way we have to look at the world. We have to realize that even the people who are doing us harm are probably doing the best they know how to do. And we should know better. And we don't need to do them what they did us. We need to find a way to help them to become better people. And that's sort of what leadership is, bringing out the best in others. Now there's some sorry scoundrels out here. It'd be hard for you to find anything good about them. But if you look hard enough, you'd be surprised. Everybody has some redeeming virtue somewhere, sometime. Well, I didn't want to run for Congress. I wanted somebody else to run. And so my heart wasn't all the way in it. But when nobody else would run, I said I had to do it. So I had to figure out how to do it. And you don't decide to run for office when the office is announced. That if you're interested in office, and I don't think you should be interested in office, you should be interested in helping people. And you keep on helping people until they said, look, we need you in this office. And then when people, that's what happened to me. When I came back from the UN, the last thing I wanted to be was the mayor. Now $50,000 might sound like a lot of money, but I had 3 kids, and one in law school, one in engineering school, one in college, and one that was goofing off in high school. I didn't see how I could afford to be a mayor for $50,000 a year. And there was an old lady who came into a meeting like this, and on a cane, and she was about 80 years old, and I thought that was old, and she looked at me and she took her cane and put it in my face. She said, look here, boy, when you came here, you wasn't nothing. Said, we made you somebody. I said, well, Martin Luther King made me somebody. She said, we made him too. And she said, now we done sent you to the Congress and the United Nations all over the world. If you can't help us now, we done wasted our time on you. And she turned and she walked out the room and slammed the door. Well, what choice did I have? I had to run and I had to win. And then when I had to win, I had to figure out a new way of running a city, because you couldn't run the city like the previous mayors had done, by getting tax money from the state and money from the federal government. And because there was no money in Washington, there was no money in the state capital in Atlanta, and I would have had to fire all my friends in City Hall if we couldn't find a way to raise some money. And I realized that there's a lot of money out here in the world. If you don't remember a thing I say, remember this. The U.S. economy is $16 trillion. The European economy is about $16 trillion. That's 32. China is just $7 trillion. That's 39. Japan is 5 trillion.
43.
44. Nigeria is 2. South Africa is about 2. That's all of the money in the world, but that's just $50 trillion. There is $35 to $40 trillion sitting in these offshore bank accounts doing nothing. Now, the way I got money into South Africa, I tried to get it into South Africa too, but it's a little slow. But I got money into Atlanta by going to people like the Dutch. Dutch were managing a lot of money for the Nigerians, for the, Nigerians don't invest their money in Nigeria nearly enough. And they take their money out and hide it. And it's losing money, it's not making money. And they don't have confidence in their own governments, and not just, people are doing that in the United States. People are not investing in the United States right now because the world is in such turmoil, and they don't know that their money's gonna be safe. So what we did in Atlanta was we made sure that we could make money safe, we could make it honest, and we could make it efficient. And so I would tell people up front, I said, look, you don't have to pay anybody under the table to do business in Atlanta. And I'd say to my staff, I said, look, don't be stupid. You can make more money honestly in a growing economy than you can steal in a dying economy. Look what happened to Abacha. What good did all of his money do to him? What good did Mobutu's money do to him? I mean, all the people who have siphoned money out of Africa, none of them have been able to enjoy it. I don't think that, they really haven't. And they go into hell. I mean, they're roughly in hell because they stole from God's children. And I'm not judging them, I'm just saying that their lives are miserable because they didn't reinvest in making the world look like God's kingdom. And I think that's what we were able to do in Atlanta. And it was very simple. Whenever somebody would come into my office, I would say, this was my cabinet, Dr. Brown come in and he wants to do something, I say, here. I would say, look, if you have any problem and they don't deliver on your project on time, here's my home phone number. You can call me up any time of day or night. Say, because we want to make sure you do your business well and do it on time. And I only got one call in 8 years. But we finished everything on time and within budget, and we saw to it that everybody got a share. When we did the Olympics, we raised $2.5 billion, but we made sure that black people and women got 41% of all the money. See, when we built that airport, when you go through that airport, those black people are not out there working for minimum wage. They own those stands. And at least 50% of the money spent in that airport is spent through and with black people and women. And so because we invest the money fairly and everybody has a share, they don't have to steal. and we create a secure environment where more monies come. In the 8 years that I was mayor, I think less than $50 billion went into all of Africa. Only about 65 billion went into all of Latin America. $70 billion came into this one city in 8 years. And that was before the Olympics. See? But we developed a reputation of being honest and efficient. See? And people will take their money where people treat them right. And they're not going to take their money where people are nickel slick. One of the highlights was Zimbabwe, because everything we put in Zimbabwe did well. But they did so well, they paid us back right quick. We had a hard time in South Africa. And we had a hard time in South Africa for the people who gave us the hardest time in South Africa turned out to be white people. I mean, we were trying not to make the Southern Africa Fund an all-black fund. And we were trying, because it came from American taxpayers who were mostly white. And we had a couple of real places where we built a hospital in Guguleto. The people had put up about $15 million for this hospital. They were $5 million short. And we invested the $5 million, and they were supposed to pay us back, gradually. And they probably would have. The hospital got built. They have first-rate health services, operation rooms and everything. But the man who was the project manager ran off with the money. Nobody knows where he went. The rest of the money. After the thing was,
A white person?
Yeah.
It's not so bad.
No, and I'm saying we had a number of projects like that. We had some black people that didn't do right too. I think that one of the best projects I like the hotel that we built at Mount Kilimanjaro, the Meru Hotel. I've never been there, but I've seen the pictures of it. And I believe that tourism is one way to develop industry. That people came here, like when I became mayor, Marriott had 2 hotels. We brought Marriott in here, we showed him a good business model. They now have over 150 Marriott hotels. Didn't cost us a penny, but each hotel room creates a job and a half almost. So a lot of people work in the hotels, in the convention business. Now, they may not make much money, but they get to send their children to college. And they get to keep a stable job. And they get tips, and they learn to be nice to people. But when people liked Atlanta when they came to visit, they decided that this was a good place to live. So they came back and they invested in businesses and they bought homes. See? We were 1 million people when I was in Congress. We're 6.2 million now. And they're not poor people coming in here. They're people coming in here with plenty of money. And they're creating jobs. And we have to find a way to keep up with them. But the other thing that was wrong with the Southern Africa Enterprise Fund, our staff was wonderful. Mostly South African and Zimbabweans. The African business people we worked with were saints. But it was appointed just as President Clinton was leaving office. And everybody that he didn't have a political appointment for, he put on the board of that foundation. So I had a whole bunch of people who didn't know anything about business and didn't know anything about Africa. And it gave me a hard time. I stuck with it for 14 years. And when I turned 75, I quit. I figured that was long enough. And we had to close it down. But like my friend who started a trucking company, he now has a farm, he has dairy products. I mean, he's built a business empire just because it was needed. And I think that the poor and the rich have a gap because of bad politics. And bad politics comes out of bad economics. And this is no excuse, but it is an explanation that technology really upsets the world. And if you don't believe it, just remember that it was 1540 when they translated the Bible from Greek and Roman to German. And we had 400 years of war over the Bible. All the slave trade came out of people who were misguided about the Bible. It took till after the Second World War for us to stabilize the world and get it right, just because of the invention of the printing press and the translation of the Bible, and everybody read it their own way. Think of all of the confusion that I can cause with this, a little iPad or my little cell phone. I can ship money anywhere in the world if I had it.
He has it.
Well, you have my phone.
He's got your money.
But, well, I hope he gets it one day, because he's working on that duckweed project. And if we can get duckweed, see, we can sell duckweed for $60 a ton. And you can grow a ton per acre at least once a week. And if you refine it, you get more for it. But like President Carter has a 10-acre lake, he can get $600 a week just from scraping the duckweed off the top. And then if he and then selling it or feeding it to his animals, he can run a farm. And the reason that's important for us in this country is, and probably Africa too, is all the young people have left the farms. And there's nobody left there but older people. And they can't do the heavy farming that they used to do. But this doesn't take much. This just takes scraping it off the top of the water, scooping up the fish when you need them. And I think what's going to happen is people are going to be coming back from the north because they got land in the south. It's much easier to live in the south. And if you have any family lands that are not in cities, hold on to it, because rural development is one way that poor people are going to get an additional stake in the democracy and a free enterprise system. You're not going to get it working for other people. You almost have to figure out how to make money yourself. And that's not all that hard to do. Let me just say that in no year that he was alive did Martin Luther King have $500,000 to work with. And he never had more than 50 people working for him. And we changed the whole world. So now, you can't ask us to do any more than that. So now it's your turn. And you have to figure out, you know, where are you from?
Ethiopia.
Ethiopia, okay. Ethiopia seems to be doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, well, I don't know why Eritrea and Ethiopia can't get along. I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all to me.
They will very soon.
Huh?
They will very soon.
Yeah. But anyway, there's so much in Ethiopia that if Ethiopia could find a way to have a truce and say we're not going to have peace. We'll always hate them and dislike them, but we're not going to shoot anybody. We're not going to kill anybody. We're not going to rob anybody, and we're going to invite Christians from the United States to come visit the earliest churches in Christendom. They would have a flood of tourists. We built our city on tourism. I figured the average person who flew here on first class spent $1,000 a day when we first got started. And the average person who came coach probably spent $200 a day. That's business people coming. If Ethiopia had a tourist industry around those churches, black people alone in the United States, when I was mayor, this is 30 years ago, spent $8 billion on conventions. So if they took a few conventions to Ethiopia every year, you can go year round. It's a beautiful flight. Big mistake Ethiopia makes, they fly to Washington and Dulles. They should be flying to Atlanta. And if they, because to go to Dulles, you got to go somewhere, then you got to change planes, and you can't check your baggage all the way through. You can come from anywhere in the world and come into Atlanta, and you can check your bag right on through to Ethiopia. And if Ethiopian Airways was flying here, you could check your bags in Ethiopia, and we'd have them wherever you wanted them when you got there. This is just the best, the biggest, the busiest, the most efficient and prosperous airport in the world. So, and why Ethiopian Air doesn't fly here, I don't know. But Kenyan Airways is thinking about flying here, I think. And here's a couple of things you have to remember. The 6, maybe 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies on the African continent, that since 2010, 1.5 million people have moved into Atlanta, metropolitan Atlanta, and the majority of them are non-white. So there's a migration coming back south, so that the politics of America is going to change starting this year, starting in November. So by 2016, this will be a different country. So, the president has 45 African presidents coming next week. He's suddenly realized that he can't just sit back and let the Chinese run everything. So we have to have a partnership. Now, we would not do it like the Chinese are doing it. We would make sure that we work with you. And one of the things I think this institution and these institutions are going to try to develop, well, there are 41 Nigerians over at Alabama State. I didn't know that. Nigeria's pay for them to go there. So there are 30 between Morehouse and Spelman. So you all are here. I don't know how much is going on all over the world, but at Georgia State we have 161 different nations enrolled there. We had almost every second level government official from Indonesia came and spent a summer with us, the summer before the tsunami. And now they're running Indonesia. So this kind of experience, and especially if you all stay together, know each other's email numbers, send information back and forth, not just flirtation. The largest middle class on the planet is going to be on the African continent in about 10 years. See? And we're going to have a power base in America, in the South, that we have not had for a long, long time. Because it's not just black people. So don't get all confused about anything that divides people. And if you work together, and if you develop together with the help that I expect coming from this country, it's been very hard for a black president to help Africa. I could get Bush to do anything in Africa. I could get Carter or Clinton to do anything in Africa. It's hard to get. First place, he can't go back home, you know, to Kenya, because y'all got Kenya so messed up. But he can't go back and be proud of Kenya yet. So, and he doesn't know. But that doesn't mean Kenya will make it. I said Kenya Airline is going to start flying in here, and I hope we're working on that. But thanks very much.